Hey, Vivian.
Hi, who's saying hi?
Kimberly Bruno. Can you see me?
Hey, Kim.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. When I saw your name, I'm like, I have to make sure I make this meeting.
Oh, that's nice. Some
Yeah,
support.
absolutely.
How are the kids doing?
Everybody's good. It's a little hectic. It's
I bet.
lunchtime though right now, so it's okay.
Are they doing e-learning at home?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like you have a nice crowd.
Don't tell me. I'm just going to look at these 5 people that I. Is Dan Garcia in yet? Because he was going to heckle me, and I told him I'd have him thrown out. I don't see him yet.
Nope, I don't see that name.
Okay.
Good afternoon and welcome everyone. My name is Adrienne McNeil and I'm the Assistant Vice President for Community and Regional Affairs at Lehigh University. And thank you for joining us today for our second version of the Community Conversations about Race. And thank you to the team for joining us today. So to ensure that individuals who are not able to join us live today are still able to learn with us, the main room in today's session is being recorded. However, the breakout room conversations will not be recorded. We plan to record upcoming CCAR sessions as well. The Community Conversations about Race is our monthly discussions open to Lehigh University faculty, staff, students, and the greater Lehigh Valley community. The discussions will vary in content and pre-work, but will all be grounded in race-related learning and open, honest communication. Topics for discussion may come from news articles, videos, books, or works of art. You do not need to attend every session to participate. Choose the sessions based on your schedule or your area of interest. So we have a large group today, so the large room is muted. If you have any questions, comments, or experiencing technical issues, please add a message to the chat and someone from the CCAR team will assist you. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Swan, who's going to go through our visions guidelines.
Thanks, Adrienne. It's so good to see everyone as we are isolated in our little cocoons all over the city and the valley. Thank you very much for coming. Just to echo what Adrian said, those of you that have been to several of these events, this is just a review. If you have any questions about them, please contact me before or after. And you've received most of these questions or statements or ideas when you received your invitation and your response to that invitation. But I'm just going to go through them very quickly. The most effective way to have these cross-cultural dialogues are to follow these guidelines, which is to try on what we're talking about. Don't stay stuck in your own opinion, no matter how grounded it is in the facts that you know or the reality that you know. Try on what the other side is discussing and see if you can see a way in which your two sides have some common ground. It's okay to disagree. There's always more than one side to any argument. But do not attack or blame or shame yourself or others, especially if you are starting to give a statement. Try not to say, I know this isn't important, but it is important. We want to hear everything you have to say. Practice self-focus, practice I statements, practice both and thinking, which goes with what we've said before. Instead of but, say and. Notice process and content. The processes that we are trying very, very hard to be inclusive, and the content that we're talking about is sometimes controversial, and that's okay. Be aware of intent and impact. Many of us do things that have impacts that we didn't intend. If you've been impacted by somebody, it's okay to say ouch. That's all you have to say. And if you have unintentionally impacted someone, acknowledge it by saying, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. It's that easy. And the final thing is maintain confidentiality. This is incredibly important because we want people to have a real sense that they are in a safe space where they can speak their minds. This is the only way that we can actually learn who and what is going on in our community. So if you want to discuss what happens here today with people outside of those that are in the room, you are free to do that. But please make sure that you don't attach people's names to those things, especially if they're controversial or don't agree with your position, so that you're not calling this person out of the safe space where they felt like they were able to speak. Okay, thanks. Adrian?
I'll hop in. So, hi everyone, my name is Carolina Hernandez. I'm an Assistant Dean of Students and the Director of the Community Service Office. And I am so proud and grateful to have the opportunity to introduce our presenter for the day. Her name is Vivian Robledo. I'm going to give a quick short bio on her, but if you want to talk, I can give you the long story at some other time. Vivian is the Director of Student Services and Minority Affairs for the Bethlehem Area School District. Previously, she served as a supervisor of student and community engagement for the district, as well as serving as a guidance counselor, elementary school assistant principal, high school assistant principal, and principal for the district's alternative school. Vivian has also worked as an HIV and AIDS counselor with the City of Bethlehem Health Bureau and as an admissions counselor, Latino school liaison for East Stroudsburg University. She received her undergrad from East Stroudsburg, her master's degree from New York University, her principal certification from Indiana University of Pennsylvania, and is literally weeks away from finishing her doctoral journey at East Stroudsburg University. Can't wait to call her Dr. Robledo. Vivian was born and raised in Bethlehem. She's the first generation of her family to be born off the mainland of Puerto Rico. She has two awesome sons who were both built by the incredible Bethlehem Area School District. Her lived experience has cultivated her passion for the pursuit of equitable and equal access to educational opportunities for students, especially those most marginalized. So I'm going to kick it off to Vivian.
Thank you, Carolina. Thank you to the CCAR Committee for inviting me to speak today. And literally, this will be a conversation. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on statistics and things like that, because we all have Google. We all can find that stuff, and the importance is in the conversation. And literally, it couldn't be more important than what has been happening in our communities with the impact of COVID in our communities of color and the deaths of so many Black people, Black men, women across our country. So this conversation is important in that vein, and also in the fact that our current president is calling it un-American to have these conversations. It couldn't be more American than to tell the story of people who born and raised here in the US. So we're gonna have a conversation about seeing ourselves in the room where it happens. And the reason why I picked that, other than loving Lin-Manuel and that whole song, but it has not and continues not to be where people of color see themselves. They do not see themselves in the room making decisions. They do not see themselves as teachers, as principals, and I was one of those people. So I'm going to spend just a brief bit of time talking about myself, other than what Carolina already said, but my journey to school counseling really didn't happen in a straight line. I was one of those students that did not see herself in the classroom, although my aunt will say growing up, I often said I wanted to be a teacher. But once I really got into school, Southside schools was one thing. So when I went to Dunnigan, when I went to Brockle, yes, I'm of both. I saw a lot of people that looked like me, a lot of students. There were a few teachers. I had a Black teacher at Dunnigan who, till today, she retired, has said that all I did was talk. So I was born to have conversations, that I spent my time talking. And I had a Latino teacher as well. So I saw myself a lot. But then when I crossed over to the other side of the bridge and went to Freedom, I didn't see myself in a lot of that. So my journey was, I'm not going to be a teacher. I wasn't even going to go to college. So I applied to ESU and that was it. And if I wasn't getting in, I wasn't getting in. And I decided to go for business, and then that didn't work out after I graduated. But my journey to becoming a counselor was when I didn't see a lot of kids while I was an admissions counselor wanting to be in education, to seek a degree. And that's when I went back to NYU to get my school counseling degree, so that I can be in the room to make it happen for a lot of other kids. So I felt that that was important to start off, because this discussion about implicit bias and microaggressions and how that impacts the future teacher pool is extremely, extremely important, and we all have a role in that. So another thing that our president mentioned was critical race theory specifically, and it's important that we understand that theoretical framework, because it does examine the impact of race and racism and that power structure that it has in all parts of society. So when we're looking at white supremacy culture, then that makes people uncomfortable, but that's what we're here for, to be uncomfortable and grow. So quick data points. Black preschool children are 3.6 times more likely to receive one or more out of school suspension. That preschool, it's not even mandated yet, and kids are being suspended from school as preschoolers. School discipline all around is an issue for Black and brown students. It's very subjective. So they're already getting that feeling of being pushed out of school, and the prison, the pipeline begins. And there are a lot of studies that show that teachers have lower expectations of Black and brown students, and that's confirmed by a lot of different works. And it's not only in how they express themselves to kids, but the work that they assign to kids. And quickly, again, some cases. We know about Plessy versus Ferguson, started the whole separate but equal. And then we had Brown versus Board of Education, where separate was not okay. And this is where critical race theory comes in again, because there's one tenet that speaks to whites as a beneficiary to racial remedies. So when you look at that case, really the benefits had to help white Americans as well for it to have been pushed through. So that's important. But even before that, a lot of people don't know about Mendez versus Westminster, California. That was in 45 and then appealed and stuck in 47. But it only applied to California Mexican children, and they were not allowed to be segregated. So they were allowed to go to other schools, and it paved the way for Brown because Thurgood Marshall was involved and he wrote the briefing for that case that then was the foundation for Brown. So that's just the foundation of our discussion today. And before we head to breakouts, another critical race theory tenet is counter stories. So what you're going to hear, I'm going to share a video with you, is a counter story. So majority stories are what we mostly hear about and is mostly the basis of decisions that are made in schools. But there are counter stories, right? Our lived experiences as Black and Brown students at one time and now professionals that we need to put value in, because it'll help us understand what our students are currently going through. Talk to the babies. That's what I heard often in some conferences. Talk to the kids and you'll understand what needs to be changed in our schooling system. So I'm gonna pass it back to Caroline so she can play this video, and then we'll share what the breakout discussion will be about.
I think the year that I started 7th grade is when I became most aware of my race being a thing. I spent my elementary school years in a school that was a lot more diverse. So there was a lot of Latinos, there was a lot of African Americans, and so it really wasn't a thing. There was so many other students that looked like me and acted like me and spoke like me, came from the same background as me. But when I started the 7th grade, my family moved to a neighborhood that was a lot less diverse, and so I was attending a school that was a lot less diverse. And so I didn't necessarily have overtly negative experiences as far as being called names or being bullied or anything like that. But I did find myself kind of turning into a chameleon of sorts. When I was around my white friends, I tried not to act too Puerto Rican or too quote unquote ghetto. And then when I was around my family or my Hispanic or African American friends, I tried not to act too white. And so it kind of caused a little back and forth in me, having a little bit of identity issues. And so it was kind of difficult finding my way and discovering who I really was. And I didn't really necessarily remember having a teacher that looked like me necessarily. I do recall that there were teachers in the building, maybe one or two, who were Latino, but they weren't necessarily my teachers. But I do remember also in the 7th grade, I had a teacher whose last name was a Hispanic last name. And so I started talking with her, and it turns out that she was married to somebody who was Hispanic, and she had children who were half Hispanic. And I just remember being so excited because all the way up until this point, I had never had a teacher who was Hispanic. And so I just remember being so excited because I could relate to her, even though she wasn't Hispanic, but she was in a Hispanic family or had a Hispanic family by marriage and, by her children. So I just remember being excited that I would be able to relate to her. So talking about music or food, it just really allowed me to connect with a teacher in a different way that I had not connected with a teacher in the past or since that time, really. So that's kind of something that really stuck out for me.
Thank you. So in that short clip, we heard, or I hope you heard, some hidden messages that were present, that although she had not had any direct or explicit racism or bias towards her, there was definitely some underpinnings that were happening in the school that she was in. A lot of times we call that the hidden curriculum, right? There's a culture at the school, and you find out quickly when you are not part of that culture. And that's, for most Black and brown students, but it also could be LGBTQ, women, you know, females. There's different groups that realize early on that they're not part of that culture and they have to start learning how to navigate. So we hear that in that message. That she didn't directly have any teacher that looked like her, but she found somebody at the school that was married to someone that she was able to connect with. And then third is the representation, the importance of that representation that I think a lot of people take it, they don't realize it. They take it for granted that when everyone looks like you in a school and has the same culture and the same expectation, that it's just the norm. And when you don't have that, how kids connect when they do find somebody. Because I have heard other teachers say, well, I don't, why are they so enthralled with that teacher? Well, you know, they bring something to the school that they are not used to having. So if you can put up the breakout questions, we're gonna move into the breakout. And basically you all will be breaking out into groups and answering the same questions that the lady in the video was answering. And I really need you to focus on your personal lived experience, the skin that you are in, because it's very different based on your race, ethnicity, culture, gender, sexual orientation. This could impact that when you think about these questions. So I need for you to come into that space when you're in your group to answer these two questions. So the first one is about your K-12 experience and thinking back as far as you can about when you first realized what your race, ethnicity, and culture was. And if you're comfortable doing so, then sharing that with the group. And then the second question is that representation and that teacher connection. Did you have a teacher that looked like you, and what did that mean for you? How did it impact you? How did the presence and maybe even the absence of somebody that looked like you? And how about now in your experience? And has that impacted you now in the professional position that you are in? So we'll have you all break out, and in about 15 minutes, we will come back together to debrief and then close this out. So thank you.
Thanks, Vivian. We're opening the breakout rooms now.
We still trickling in?
Yep, 121.
I think everyone's back.
Cool. Well, welcome back, everyone. We're going to pass it off to Vivian.
All right. I don't know if I want to show the next video or if I'll wait to the end for this one. Let's show the next video, and then we'll allow people to share a little bit about their discussion, and then some closing points about, well, what can we do from here, right? All right, Caroline. Is she here? Is she back?
Let's hope so.
Oh, there she is. Uh-oh.
I don't know if it likes the link of the video.
Yeah, let's not then, because there's only
Okay.
15 minutes, and maybe we could share that with the people who are here, you know, at a later point.
Okay.
That circle of death right there. All right, so we're going to jump into maybe having some people share in your, if you're comfortable in sharing and what your discussion was, some key points or some aha moments that are making you think for when you leave here. Anyone?
I'll buy
Okay, good.
it. I'll do it. The silence kills me. Okay. So I thought what was really interesting in our room, and I'm not going to say any names or anything, but just what was interesting is we all had very different experiences. And it was really interesting to hear how it was almost like some of us had to take a step back and be like, did I have a teacher that looked like me? Or did, you know, and you know, for some of us, it's been a little longer. So since we've been in K-12. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And then taking a step back and thinking about, well, what would it have been like had we had a different teacher, right? So one of the things that really sticks out in my mind was a student very wonderfully shared, you know, having teachers who looked like her encourage her. And then it made me think of, well, would that have felt differently if a teacher who didn't look like you said the same thing? And it came back to that shared experience of just not having somebody who knew what your life was like and saying you could do it meant so much more than having somebody who has no idea about your background or doesn't share that experience. Even if they say the same words, it just didn't feel the same way. So I thought that was really impactful and really nice to hear. And I thought it was really powerful.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
I know Leslie, I'm sorry, Vivian, I just plopped in, but I wanted to share, I had an opportunity, and I didn't share this with my group, but I had an opportunity to teach on the college level at several different institutions. And one of my most favorite experiences was working with a group of students at Penn State University, the Berks campus. And so I worked with first generation students. They were predominantly African-American and Hispanic, and they came from the Philadelphia area. So that first day of walking into the class and having an idea, they didn't really have to explain their story. I just kind of got it, like without needing to say too much. I really just understood. There was just a certain kind of comfort level. And just sharing, I was so super excited to have this experience to finally give back to other people. There have been people that I can point to who look like me and who haven't looked like me in the past, who've lent a helping hand to me, and I was so incredibly grateful. So I wanted to have that opportunity, and I took it at Penn State, and I love those students, and I just made sure to tell them how incredibly bright they are, that the future is theirs, and all those things that I knew growing up that I needed to hear, and how important that would be coming from someone who looked just like that you can do this.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you, Kim. Noel.
So in my group, the one thing that was kind of noticeable was like everyone had an aha moment at a different time, where it was like I didn't realize what I was really going through at a different time and a different moment. Some came in like middle school, some came switching high school, some came going to colleges. And the biggest thing is like, as we spoke in our group, it was like people didn't feel as if their voice was equally as important kind of in our group. But as you look at it from like a big picture point of view, one, it's like, it's almost okay to be nervous to come in a setting like this. And to be vulnerable, it happens for everybody. And my other thing was like, your voice is important because everyone has their own experiences. And the biggest thing is like, if you're in a group like this, that means you're willing to make the change to make it a better place. So it's like your voice is even more powerful than someone who's not in a group like this.
Wow. Yeah, thank you, for real. Sarah.
Hi, so we had a group that actually shared a lot of the same experiences, but I'm sitting in a room that has my high school yearbook because I was really struggling to think, like, I kind of flipped the question on its head, and, you know, it's like, I've always had teachers that look like me, always. They've always been white. A lot of times they're women, but I'm like, did I ever have any teachers that didn't look like me? And the answer is no, because out of 181 teachers that were there in my senior year, there were 2 people who visibly looked different from me. And wow, I kind of thought maybe I just got a bad draw, but there were literally not any. And so we, in our group, talked a little bit about how that might have like impacted where we were recommended to go to college and the conversations that were had about that. And, you know, all of the things that trickle down with curriculum and who's asking questions like, oh, are we talking about this? And so when people bring up historical events and, you know, did you talk about Tulsa and did you talk about Trail of Tears? The answer is no, we didn't. And I'm not misremembering it. I'm not, you know, like just forgetting that lesson that day. I genuinely don't think it was ever discussed.
Yeah, and that even happens with our ESL students that come from other countries, right? When history is the hardest subject for them because we are so one-sided. It's not at all an explanation of history. It's how I tell it as the conqueror of the situation. And our students that come from any other area are like, yeah, that's not how we learned it in school. So it's quite interesting. But Brett?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on something from my perspective. Like the first question was, I didn't really have to confront that question growing up K through 12. And I realize now that that's my version of white privilege. The fact that other people who don't look like me have to confront that at such an early age. So this is something that I'm aware of now. And I want to make sure that, you know, being a new father, I want my daughter to be aware of that at an earlier age. So that way she and I and my wife can make changes going forward. So that was something that was big to me. And, you know, I had aha moments throughout the time, but confronting it today is good. And certainly uncomfortable to share that, but, you know, certainly willing to make the change going forward.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I've used this in other groups, and often the white members of the group talk about when they notice someone else's experience of that it came up. And I have to say, no, I want to know when you realized that you were white. And they often like, wow, you know, I never really had to, you know, it's just the way schooling is, the way we live our lives is often not having to stop and think about that. And that's why hidden curriculum is really important to talk about in our schools. What is the culture of our school? Lehigh University, what is your culture? What are the do's and the don'ts that are not actually being said, but are being said, right? There's race talk happening without even opening your mouth. So those are the things we need to be aware of. Debbie Bird, would like to share?
Okay, I'm unmuted now, right?
Okay.
I guess I had muted myself as well as you muting me. The four of us in our group were all white, and for most of us, encountering a more heterogeneous school population occurred in junior high school or even in college. Two members of the group were Jewish. One talked about going to a public school but living in a Jewish neighborhood, so that most of the other students and teachers there, you know, were Jewish. Another went to a Jewish school. I talked about growing up in rural West Virginia and my family moving to Fort Lauderdale, Florida between 7th and 8th grade and going from an all-white community to one more racially diverse. Another person was Catholic, went to Catholic schools, including a Catholic college. And so, you know, none of us really had to think a lot about issues of privilege or of racism as it personally impacted us. Something that came up that we talked about that hasn't been touched on yet, is about how important it is for white people to be actively anti-racist and to bring issues of race and homophobia and all the other isms and phobia into, in my case, the classroom, but in other environments, and how challenging that is, how scary at times, how risky, and yet how essential it is as well. Even if we stumble and make mistakes at times or unintentionally say something awkward or offensive, we are at least engaging in the conversation.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you. Vinay, am I saying that right? Vinay Berger?
Yes, hi. Sorry. I've been in and out a little. I work at the health center, so we're still seeing patients. But I thought that question was really interesting about when you first noticed your race, when that became an issue for you as a person. And for me, my experience was so different because I'm a white person, and I was born and raised in inner city Baltimore, which was really pretty segregated actually, but we were kind of in the middle. And I went to a predominantly Black school. I went to predominantly Black schools all the way through until college. So my experience was probably a little different than many other white people, where I was one of 3 and then eventually 2 white people in my entire class. So it was probably very much, I think it probably was different than learning your racial identity in a primarily Black and white environment if you're a Black person. But the school, it was in the 60s. I was born in 68, so I'll just put it out there. And there was a lot of, the school being a primarily Black school and had a Black principal, and frankly, I think the vast majority of my teachers were Black women, and there were 2 white teachers. So it was just something, I knew I was white, believe me, that was identified pretty quickly. I also knew I was of the race of people who did most of the oppressing, which was hard to take, but is history. And so it was an interesting way to grow up, I think, for me. And when I went to an arts high school, which was very ethnically and racially mixed. And then when I went to college, I went to a large university with a lot of white suburban students. And although I was a white person, I'm half Jew, half Protestant, you know, I grew up in a very diverse background. I never felt like I belonged anywhere really, necessarily. So I just always sort of wondered, and we were very aware of racial issues from a young age because of our school and also because of my parents, thankfully. But I always wondered, you know, as a white person, when you went to a university, especially University of Maryland, College Park, in that time, there were like Black fraternities and Black fraternities within the Black fraternities, and there were Jewish fraternities and Jewish sororities and Korean fraternities and sororities and Chinese and on and on and on. And it was really such a segregated, really strictly segregated environment. So I had a really different experience growing up, but I think still being a white person and having that white privilege, even though I was the minority in the group, was really, really significant and something that I have increasingly become aware of as a, you know, as I live in this world and as an adult. So
thank you. Thank you. I think we'll take John and then we'll do some closing. We're almost at 1 o'clock. Okay.
Thanks. So something that occurred to me is that I, in answering this question, I thought about a teacher who I hadn't thought about at all until just today. And I have gone back into my mind prior to this to think about the first Black teacher that I've had. And so it was interesting to see that difference of talking about race in the abstract versus talking about race as a personal thing, and really like encountering a memory that I hadn't encountered in a long time. And then the kind of the last takeaway I had from it was that it's unfortunate that children are asked this kind of question earlier on, and then we have to reflect upon it now, 20, 30, 40 years out. And I wonder how different my school experience would be and how different I would be as a person if I had had that realization, of both my racial identity and the lack of seeing that in the people who were my authority figures. going forward. And so, I work with middle schoolers now, and I'm wondering how their lives will be different if I ask them that question at this point in their lives, as opposed to now for me.
Right. Do it. I know here in the district, we are having these conversations early. We're having them with teachers, we're having them with administrators and our students, because it matters. We need to know what our kids need. And a lot of times we say, well, they're too young, they don't really know. They know a lot more than we give them credit for in the age that they're in, and we need to value that conversation with them. So thank you to everybody who spoke. In closing, what can we do, right? What can we do? We know that the teacher pool is mainly white females. We know that. The administration pool is mainly white males. We know that. I'm doing my research on race talk and culturally proficient leadership practices, and most of the people who responded were white males. So what can we do? Sally in the video talks about, she found somebody who was married to somebody who was Latino, but understood a lot of that. So it's not absent of, right? Because you're not Black and you're not brown doesn't mean you can't be valuable to students that are Black and brown. You need to be. There's no debate about that. You're in front of them. So we need you to learn how to be, if not already, advocates. We need you to be co-conspirators. We need you to be allies. And someone mentioned that it hadn't been mentioned yet, but anti-racist, right? And how do you pose these questions, and how do you get into conversations with people that you hear being biased? And it's as simple as causing the pause in the moment to make them think about what they're saying. So you don't have to say anything brilliant or really bright, but just pause them in the moment and ask them, what made you feel that way? Or that's not my experience. Where did that experience come for you? And it makes them stop and think. So we need to be able to do that. We need to grow our own. We have a track in high school where we're starting to have kids look into education, and we need to invite them back, to become teachers when they go away from us. Lehigh, you have school psychologists, you have administrators. You need to have these conversations and start being culturally proficient and responsive if you aren't already. I know a lot of the work is happening at Lehigh. And Bethlehem in general. Somebody was in my group that oversees Ulner and talking about bringing acts and conversations that we can go deeper in. Bethlehem in a total needs to be much more culturally responsive. We have a mixed group of people here, and if you want them to stay here and you want others to come and work here, then we shouldn't have to go to New York and New Jersey to find social events that are interesting to us. So these are different ways that as a community, we can work on this while we work on hiring more. And this is really important because, as Black Panther, as Chadwick has taught us, that representation matters. His death was huge for a lot of people because it was the first time we saw someone that looked like us in that kind of a role in the whole movie. So I hope you gained something from this. It was great for me. I struggled with not feeling nervous about it, and I'm glad that we had this conversation, and hope to see you all in the next ones. Anything in closing, anyone?
Jennifer's up for closing.
All right.
Yes.
Oh, well, you did a wonderful job. Thank you, everyone that participated. That was really, really, really nice. Let's give ourselves a hand for doing that. Very challenging conversations that everybody made. And thank you. Let's thank Vivian, who did a wonderful job. Thank you. And Tara and Carolina and Adrian, who put the whole thing together. Thank you very much. If you have suggestions that you would like to send to us for next topics, please do that, or speakers or videos or books. We're compiling those and putting them together. Where is the survey? Did we send that around? Where is that? Here it is. Please take the survey. It's very important so we can let people know why we're doing this. And we didn't have a way in the survey of capturing everyone's opinion or everyone's comments or thoughts. Please feel free to send those to all of us. Any one of us that you have seen here, we have the slides in the beginning that has everybody's name. I'm Jennifer Swan. Carolina Hernandez, you may know, Vivian. Please feel free to reach out to us if you have a comment or a suggestion or a thought so we can do better every time we do it. And watch for more of these and invite your friends. All right?
All right.
And have a great day. Bye, everybody. See you.
Vivian, you crushed it.
Thank you.
That was awesome.
Vivian, you did a great job.